Thank you. Thank you. Cynthia Corn, 438 Jefferson Avenue. I live in Ward 3. So I'm here tonight to go on record as saying I feel quite strongly that the majority of the people of Louisville don't believe in vilifying a member of City Council who has put in hundreds of hours in support of the fire families and recovery, who has agreed with the council, with her fellow council members, on 99% of the votes cast during her tenure, who, in the face of being EPA acknowledged as severe air quality in our area, has taken climate action, not just talked about it, and is in the majority with the voters of Louisville. I feel this, and even as I reach out to people, a lot of people don't even know about this recall. And when they do, and they hear what I just said, no legal or ethical issues against her, it's unfounded. And we just said the Pledge of Allegiance. You know, indivisible. After a fire, this is where people, if you look at who signed the petition for recall of Councilwoman Maxine Most, no coincidence, they're a bunch of the Yes on RTR people. Not a shock. And we can plan on those topics of sustainability continuing to be important to the people of Louisville and the majority. So the other thing I want to mention is that Councilwoman Most is a person. She's a human. She's a friend. She's taken action. She's brought goats to our city. The rest of y'all voted on it, pilots, but Mayor Stolzman did the research. Several other of you supported, but Councilwoman Most was the strongest advocate for sustainable action in our town. And it's important on this night that that be on the public record, that she is goodness personified. She's put in hundreds of hours on behalf of the fire families. And it's a shame that some pro-development people in this town are using our fire situation to bring a recall to our fine city. We are better than that. I raised my children in this town. I am friends with people all over this community, and we are better than this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tamar Krantz.
Thank you. I'm Tamar Krantz. I live at 691 West Street. And I just wanted to comment on the same item that's on the consent agenda about the recall election. I really appreciate all of you serving on council, and I haven't agreed with every one of your votes, but I think that you're all fair, and I really like the way that our council has dialogue. I especially appreciate how you, Mayor Maloney, since you've taken office as mayor, have worked these meetings, and I feel that we're a very conciliatory community. I'm just disappointed in the recall, and the staff analysis sounds like there's not really a way to avoid it, but I'm really concerned about the divisiveness that it's going to create in our community. And I was looking at all the other recalls in the state of Colorado in 2023. It looked like there was one because somebody failed to disclose a personal interest in a project. But a lot of them are for political reasons, people who don't agree with votes. And the number of recalls in our country has increased like exponentially over the past 3 years. And I wondered if you guys could take this off the consent agenda. And I would love to hear your thoughts on, is there any way to avoid this legally or to delay it closer to the November election? And is there any way that we can move forward with this to help our city not not turn into a really divided community over something like this, because I believe that it's the reason for the recall amongst other Colorado recalls is very unusual. Lacking empathy isn't something that I'm seeing in any of the other recalls. And so we stand out, on Ballotopedia as a city with an unusual kind of election coming up. And I'm just wondering if it's something, I would love to hear your thoughts on how to help our community as we move through this. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Sherry Summer, and she has combined pooled time, and you'll have to tell me the person's last name. I can't quite read the last name.
Oh, sure. It's Sal Brigham. Thank you. Sherry Summer, 910 South Palisade Court. Thanks so much for listening to what I have to say also about the recall. This morning I was thinking about the recall, and I started thinking about the Queen of Hearts and Alice in Wonderland. Her motto was justice before sentencing. I just want to read a little passage from that book. The players all played about at once without waiting for turns, quarreling all the while, and fighting for the hedgehogs. And in a very short time, the queen was in a furious passion, and went stamping about and shouting, "Off with his head, and off with her head," about once a minute, justice before sentencing. When I think of the queen, I think of what I'm hearing now, and it sounds like off with Maxine's head, off with her head, get rid of her. This, I think, has not been thought through. I think we need to, as Tamar said, maybe take a step back. Instead of saying off with her head and have a recall, how about we think about something positive, which I already see happening in the city, and that's the great work that was started by Lisa Ritchie, working with the community, building social capital. Why don't we think of putting money towards that rather than taking resources away from things that are very positive? I think the recall is not necessary. I don't think it will be effective. I think it's expensive. I think it's simplistic to the point of distorting Maxine's record. I think it would set a dangerous precedent. Let's just go through some facts. Recalls are supposed to be used for serious ethical or legal violations, such as stealing money or using your office for personal gain. They're not intended for differences of opinion or differences of personality. I don't think it's necessary. We have a 6-member council and a mayor. I feel more represented at times by one person or another. Someone on council or the mayor will represent me. There are some people that I feel less represented by, but that's normal because we have a variety of people in town. That's what we need. So pointing the finger at one person and saying you're not right is not correct. I don't think it'll be effective. Look at any revolution, an off with your head situation, the French Revolution, the Iranian Revolution. Look at Iraq, look at Afghanistan. All of these places were that mentality, let's just get rid of them. Let's get rid of the people we don't like. I think it would be a challenge to find one revolution or one situation where that actually changes anything. It creates a lot of chaos. This election is going to be expensive. I don't know the exact number, but perhaps $30,000, perhaps $40,000. That's really unfortunate. It could have been timed with the coordinated election, but it hasn't been. So why are we spending this much money on an election that, well, not only are we in an off election year, but this is off the off year election. So what are we really going to capture? A lot of anger? I think this is too simplistic. We're not mapping onto the reality of what Maxine has done, her record, and the hard work she's put into this. This is not a good, bad solution or situation. She's worked very hard. She's been prepared for meetings. She brings new perspectives to this group, and I think that's a good thing. We need new ideas. We have to look at her voting record. She supported, for example, not requiring sprinklers. That would have been very, very expensive. I don't hear people saying that. Oh, that was good for the fire victims. Thank you, Maxine. I believe that Maxine has voted her conscience and she's concerned about the fiscal health of the entire community. She is not acting with personal interest in mind or personal gain. In fact, it's a sacrifice, like it is for all of you. Oops, sorry. I think this sets a terrible precedent. Are we going to have elections at the drop of a hat? Every time someone doesn't like one of you, every time someone doesn't like what you have to say, they don't like your opinion? Is that the way we will have a healthy democracy? I don't think so. I would like to ask also that you take this off the consent agenda before approving. I hope there's still time. Perhaps the petitioners would be willing to withdraw their petition. I don't know all the legal resources we might have, but I would ask if there's any way possible that we do not proceed with this election, because I don't see any good coming out of it. Let's not say off with her head. Let's say, let's work together and learn from one another. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the chambers who would like to comment on items not on the agenda or items on the consent agenda? All right, let's see if there's anybody on Zoom. Anybody on Zoom like to comment? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone have changes to the consent agenda? Mayor Pro Tem Fahey?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would like to pull off item C, approval of Parks and Recreation Month proclamation.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 We will move that to the first item under regular business. Anything else? All right. Would someone like to make a motion?
I will move to approve the consent agenda as adjusted.
All right, second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. So next we'll move on to council informational comments on pertinent items not on the agenda. Any councilors have comments? Councilor Lay.
Yeah, I just am appearing hopefully for just a little while on Zoom tonight. I'm waiting for a call from my dad concerning my mother who's in the hospital. Thanks.
Thank you for letting us know. We hope that goes okay. Yes, Councilor Most.
Yeah, I wanted to make some comments on some things that have happened really nationally and globally over the last 2 weeks that I think are really, really concerning. And I think as a community, welcoming, inclusive community that cares about sustainability and the climate, that I just wanted to raise these issues. And the first is the Supreme Court ruling about what I consider to be pretty blatant LGBTQ plus discrimination. I'm not going to speak for my fellow council members, but I know them, and I know that these are people that care and that are allies to the LGBT community in our community in Louisville. And I just wanted to personally say that I am not just a supporter, I'm an ally. And when the LGBT community in our town, from my perspective, is kind of under attack at a federal level, that impacts me, and I care, and I'm here to stand up for you. I think it's really important. The other concern and issue that I just wanted to talk about a little bit, because it impacts all of us, and I know that, again, my fellow council members have repeatedly demonstrated their commitment to sustainability and to taking steps to combat climate change, that last week, 4 days in a row, we hit successive global records for the temperature of the planet. And that is something that terrifies me. It terrifies me personally, and it terrifies me for my daughter and hopefully one day grandchildren. We, especially in this community that we have been hit so hard by the climate changing around us. And I think it's really strange. The last 2 months, we had this weird, cool, rainy weather, which I completely enjoyed. And yet all around us, literally, people are dying in this country from heat. People are dying from massive floods. Vermont just got, 2 or 3 months worth of rain in a day. And so this is happening. It's happening now. And I know all of my fellow council members take this really seriously. And I just wanted to call it out and say, as a community, we have to do better. I know we've been making progress, and I just think, this is something that is in our faces, confronting us. It's not some future problem. It's a problem that I think, I'm the end of the baby boomer generation. Like, we have an obligation to do as much as we can and hopefully make a dent so that my fellow council members in the next generation, my daughter in an even different generation, have a little bit better time dealing with what is, having a global impact on people's lives and well-being.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. So we will move on to the city manager's report. Could
Thank you,
Could
thank
you
you, Mayor.
limit it to 3 minutes?
I can, no report, thank you.
Exceeding expectations. The next item is regular business. So we moved item C from the consent agenda, which is approval of Parks and Recreation Month proclamation. And I'm going to hand that off to Mayor Pro Tem Fahey.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. I wanted to just mention that in addition to the proclamation, which, by the way, is a national thing, this year's theme is Where Communities Grow. And we have a very growing community right now. Some coming back, some that are new to the area. And we also have a wonderful park and recreation program, and the parks and opportunities in the city of Louisville are just incredible. So because of that, and the new item that the Parks program is sponsoring this year, they're introducing Lou. Lou is a young man, I think. And
This guy?
yes, that's Lou. I have a big Lou. So he will be found in various places. If you look on the pinboard over there, there's a map of, what do they call it? Well, actually, you know what? Ginger, would you please come up and explain the whole program surrounding Lou for us?
Hi, everyone, and happy National Park and Recreation Month. I have the wonderful opportunity to have a very fun job in the city of Louisville, and that is to tell the story of parks, recreation, and open space. My name is Ginger Cross, and I'm the Senior Marketing Specialist for Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Department here in the city of Louisville. And with this being National Park and Recreation Month, we wanted to do something a little bit different. And so we came up with the Adventures of Lou. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Flat Stanley. Anybody Flat Stanley? Flat Stanley was a storybook character who got flattened by a bookshelf and then learned because he was flat, he could travel more places. So brainstorming with our department, we came up with this idea that we would have a flat Lou. And Lou, we wrote a little story about Lou and his quest to go on adventures around parks and open space. So I had written a couple of bullet points for Deb to use, but I will just read those here for you. Park and Recreation Month is a time to celebrate the plethora of parks, open space, and recreational opportunities the city of Louisville has to offer, and also the staff that makes it all happen behind the scenes. Local park and recreation professionals play a key role in fostering community health and well-being and creating environmental resilience and economic growth. The city of Louisville employs over 350 full-time, part-time, and seasonal staff workers that work every day to run a 10,000 square foot recreation and senior center, operate an 18-hole public golf course, protect, preserve, and manage over 2,000 acres of open space, and manage over 100 different designated park sites throughout the city. These jobs range from big public-facing projects like building a new playground to behind-the-scenes tasks such as fixing the heater on a pool or repairing an irrigation line. Each person in this department contributes to making Louisville a great place to live and a place where community grows. The Adventures of Lou is designed to be a creative way to draw attention to Park and Recreation Month, and it has 2 goals. The first is to encourage people to get outside and explore Louisville. The Adventure Passport is a scavenger hunt around Louisville highlighting 8 properties and fun facts about each. The downloadable Lou template allows people to also print out Lou and take Lou on their own adventure and share with our staff and on social media what they love about parks, recreation, and open space. I will say that as staff, we love to hear what citizens love about our park, recreation, and open space. The second goal is following Lou gives community members a glance into what happens behind the scenes. Just like you have a printout of Lou, all of our staff members have been given their own Lou to take into the field. Each day, our social media account will feature Lou working with staff and their jobs. Lou will be patrolling with the ranger, serving senior lunches, lifeguarding the pool, emptying the trash, mowing the grass, and more. There are so many jobs in parks, recreation, and open space, and Lou wants to celebrate them all. We are excited to have some fun and celebrate that our community is stronger, more vibrant, and more resilient because of parks and recreation. And we would like you to all be part of this as well and become involved with taking Lou, going on the scavenger hunt, and really just getting out to explore all the parks, recreation, and open space opportunities that we have here.
Thank you, Ginger. I also want to add that once you've gotten all of your check marks on your passport and you bring it to the rec center and turn it in, you will be entered in for a drawing for a prize. That has not yet been determined, I'm guessing, but okay. So, but in light of all of that and in thanks for all of the rec staff and the volunteers, I would like to read the proclamation. All right. Whereas Parks and Recreation is an integral part of communities throughout this country, including the city of Louisville, and whereas Parks and Recreation promotes health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks, and whereas Parks and Recreation promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks and Recreation encourages physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, swimming pools, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas Parks and Recreation is the leading provider of healthy meals, nutrition services, and education. And whereas Parks and Recreation is the leading provider of health, Parks and Recreation programming and education activities such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education are critical to childhood development. And whereas Parks and Recreation increases a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Parks and Recreation is fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas Parks and Recreation is essential and adaptable infrastructure that makes our communities resilient in the face of natural disasters and climate change, and whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors, and whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the City of Louisville recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resource, now therefore be it resolved by the City Council that July 2023 is recognized as Park and Recreation Month in the City of Louisville, Colorado, dated this 11th day of July 2023.
Would you like to make a motion to approve this?
I move to approve this proclamation.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
City Clerk, the fifth whereas is repeated in the document. So,
We really wanted you to hear that.
well, luckily, the Mayor Pro
We did.
Tem skipped it the second time, so. Anyway.
We'll take that out of the official version.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to the rest of the regular business. So item A is an update, the Boulder County Consortium of Cities Minimum Wage Working Group. And I'm handing this off to the city manager.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll start real quick. This is an update on an initiative that started some years back. The city of Louisville was engaged initially, and then things, as I understand, slowed down a bit with the pandemic, and of course we had the fire, and now there's an effort to reinvigorate this work and move forward. We thought an update would be appropriate for you. The group is also doing updates at the other cities, and I think, Commissioner, do you want to? Our council member Folkert from City of Boulder will kick this off. Thank you.
Thank you all. My name's Lauren Folkerts, and I'm a council member for the City of Boulder. On behalf of the Boulder County Consortium of Cities Minimum Wage Working Group, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time this evening to discuss this important issue. I want to start us off by talking about why we're looking at minimum wage at the municipal and regional level and the origins of this effort. In 2019, the state legislature passed HB 19-1210, giving local governments the right to set their own minimum wage. Later that year, the Boulder County Consortium of Cities began discussions on this topic, but they were interrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. 4 years later, we have some new council members, including myself. The pandemic has become endemic, and we have all felt the numerous impacts on our economies. We have seen a sharp increases in inflation, interest rates, and the cost of living in general. These impacts were covered by federal assistance increases, but as those programs sunset, the gaps between wages and cost of living are becoming much more challenging to overcome for an increasing number of our community members. In Boulder, our food banks are feeding twice as many people as they were before the pandemic. Many financial assistance programs are seeing unprecedented levels of need. Eviction numbers are rapidly increasing across the county, and BVSD has gone from seeing 290 students experiencing homelessness in 2021 to more than 800 students this year. For these reasons and others, the Minimum Wage Working Group was formed in 2022 to look at these issues collectively because we recognize that we are not isolated. Changing the minimum wage in any community changes our regional economy. Many people live in different communities from where they work. Businesses, nonprofits, and other organizations operate across our communities. And we believe a regional approach to considering a minimum wage would be best for understanding and meeting the needs of our interdependent economies while also providing consistency for both employees and employers. Over the last year, the working group has met to examine the enabling legislation, understand the required process, and conduct early engagement with cities and stakeholders to begin the earliest assessments of the needs and interests of our communities. Now we are providing an update and inviting participating councils to weigh in on the next steps. Boulder and Longmont City Council have received similar presentations, and both councils have supported continuing participation in the working group and pursuing next steps, including scoping community engagement and analysis needs. The support for a regional approach was strongly supported, but there were several concerns about a 2024 implementation being enough time for sufficient engagement and time for the business community to plan for this change, because any change to the minimum wage can only be implemented on January 1st of a given year. Tonight, we are not asking for final decisions on target wage. We are checking in with you for your support, for continued collaboration with the working group, and getting your initial thoughts on the engagement process and overall timeline. Understanding which communities are willing to partner in our next steps will inform scoping for our community engagement and financial analysis. I hope you will continue to partner with us in these efforts by working on minimum wage collaboratively, we can establish a wage that provides many of the benefits of a higher wage while also avoiding some of the potential downsides. With that, I'd like to introduce Commissioner Levy to talk about the county's role and support in this process.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Claire Levy and I'm one of 3 Boulder County Commissioners. It's very nice to be in front of you this evening. I want to apologize in advance if I can't stay for the whole conversation. I have another engagement later this evening. But I did want to just preliminarily before we take you through the work that's been done, just share with you what what Boulder County's role in this has been and how we see this project going forward. Boulder County played a very active role in the legislation in 2019 that allowed local governments to enact a minimum wage that was different from the state minimum wage. And the reason we did that and the reason the legislature passed that bill was recognizing that when the minimum wage was increased in 2016, that set a statewide floor that all communities would have to observe, but that there were parts of the state, particularly the Front Range, Boulder County, and some of the mountain resort communities that have much higher costs of living, and that they may want to set a different wage. And so that was the reason for it. And we know that Boulder County has a very high cost of living in Colorado, and hopefully you'll have a chance to look at the self-sufficiency standard that Colorado Center on Law and Policy has recently updated. So Boulder County has been, we staff, as you know, the consortium of cities, and we've staffed the minimum wage working group. We are hoping to continue to play that role as a convener in this conversation. I do want to let you know at the outset that although Longmont and City of Boulder have expressed some concerns about being prepared to go in January 1st, 2024, our board is determined to meet that date. We're not doing that with a go-it-alone approach. We're really doing it more in hopes that we can facilitate a regional discussion and have all of the communities that are interested in a local minimum wage join us so that we can do this together in January of 2024. We realize that that's a challenge, but we think we can have those conversations. So I think that's all I want to say at this point, and I believe Taylor Ryman is going to take you through just the background on the legislation and the work that's been done to date and the various options that the other councils have considered. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Taylor Ryman. I am Assistant to City Council in the City of Boulder. And I've been working with Councilmember Folkerts and our folks at the consortium throughout this last year's process. I'm going to just go through a little bit of an update on what we've done so far. This is probably the first time a lot of you are hearing about this effort, and so really is a privilege to be here and to be talking to you tonight. So as Lauren mentioned, there was that enabling legislation, and Commissioner Levy mentioned there was that enabling legislation in 2019, and I just wanted to run through some of the core components of it. It requires a level of community engagement and consultation with the groups listed there. There is a cap of 10% of jurisdictions that can enact a minimum wage, but that 10%, if multiple communities enter into an IGA and pass an ordinance collaboratively at the same time, they would only count as one in that calculation. So in addition to the reasons Lauren mentioned, the legislation sort of makes it advantageous to pursue something collaboratively. There's an effective date that must coincide with January 1st of any year. That is very inflexible. And then escalation is limited to $1.75 or 15%, whichever is higher. This is a bit of the repeat of the last slide, but I think it's helpful for understanding what is baked in by statute and what has a little bit more flexibility. So as we go into, for those participating into a collaborative approach, like where would the decision points be really? So those first pieces there, the implementation date, that's a baked in piece. Employee time and jurisdiction is covered, but passing through is not. This covers all workers and emancipated minors with no exceptions. And tip off credit has to be equal to tip offset must be equal to the state offset. In 2022, that was $3.02. So it helps with the decision making piece, but kind of creates a little bit of a one size fits all approach. And then in terms of our policy discretion, choosing the target wage, of course, escalation and annual adjustments. Normally escalation periods to a target happen over 3 to 5 years or so, and covering unemancipated minors, and communities can create their own enforcement mechanisms or rely on the existing state process. This slide is just to help give an understanding of where local wages fall right now in the state. So Louisville, along with all other cities really except for Denver, align with the state at $13.65. There's several cities across the state that have their own self-imposed workforce living wage, and this applies to most of their city employees and some of their contracts. So in Boulder, that's $17.42. Longmont, it's a little over $15, and Boulder County just raised theirs to $22.44. Denver was the first to adopt a new minimum wage after the legislation was passed. They have escalated at this point to $15.85. And the University of Colorado recently upped theirs, and Fort Collins considered an ordinance, but their council actually rejected it because they were interested in a more regional approach. This slide on possible target wage approaches is not a recommendation from the working group. That target wage for our collaborative effort has not been set yet. This is just to show where we could align and external recommendations. So there's a self-sufficiency proposal from the Self-Sufficiency Wage Coalition that started forming in February, largely as a response to hearing about the consortium conversations. They convened a coalition of about 24 different groups, policy experts, nonprofits, labor unions, and they have proposed this the $25 target by the year of 2028 with about a 13% increase each year. We could align with existing workforce living wages across the city and county that already exist, or align with Denver or our university partners who are already well exceeding the state minimum. On the working group, the municipal partners listed here have been part of this since the get-go about a year ago. Boulder County has been playing a great role as a convener in the conversation, and they have a bit of a smaller stake in the game because any ordinance passed for them would only apply to unincorporated county, and there's not a ton of huge workforce centers out there. But again, in terms of organizing our conversations, they've been really helpful there. And then City of Boulder, Louisville, and Longmont, we've had some limited check-ins with stakeholders over the last year. That coalition, chambers of commerce, the university. I wouldn't necessarily count this as part of the engagement requirement that we're looking to meet. The proposal that we have has much more involved community engagement. This is really just sort of check-ins with stakeholders. And there's been a couple info sessions hosted. This is an updated working group timeline, recent as of a couple weeks ago. You might have seen maybe another timeline, but this came out of our scope for the scope, if you will, when we're looking towards those next steps that Lauren mentioned of scoping engagement models and economic analysis. That's where we're at in the left-hand side. The rest of the full timeline is helpful for understanding what are the chunks of work, what is the sequence of events, like when would we be bringing check-ins and updates to council. The intent of it, again, understanding the huge value of a collaborative effort with this, is that we would provide opportunities for communities to both onboard and offboard at different parts of the process. And the intention is really to collaborate and come together and create similar information so that we're all at least making decisions based on apples to apples. But in the event that goals or shared outcomes were no longer shared, there would be opportunities for communities to sort of depart from the effort and do their own thing. So following the scoping of those two pieces, the proposal is for a parallel process on those two items. We've heard in early engagement from council and the community that there are areas of serious concern in this. Healthcare workers, tipped workers, unemancipated minors. These are areas that we'd want to focus on in phase 1 of community engagement, work out some of these conversations and these questions. Pairing that with what we find out from the economic analysis would sort of inform phase 2 of community engagement that was broader. And that January 1st implementation date and those month durations you see associated with it, that's the intention for a 2025 implementation. So different than the county, and something to keep in mind. These scoping considerations, I listed it out really based on what Boulder might do. I know each city has different ways of approaching community engagement. Maybe you have your own kinds of surveys. I think the big takeaway from this slide is that the main components would be analysis on the economic front, and we'd want to do an equity analysis. A couple of our cities have an equity instrument that I think we definitely want to run this through. Doing the engagement, of course, and then another big deliverable is the drafting of those ordinances and agreements. Because of the collaborative approach, there are a lot of opportunities to share the work and share costs. Different communities could take leadership on different deliverables. We don't always need to recreate the wheel. And CU, partnering with CU and perhaps hiring consultants could be an opportunity, particularly for that economic analysis piece. So I tried to make that pretty quick, but I imagine council has questions, and myself and Councilmember Folkerts are available for that. I think Commissioner Levy is going to head out. So maybe if you have a question, ask her first.
Thank you, Commissioner Levy. Did you have a parting comment?
Yeah, thank you. And I really apologize having to leave. I didn't time things very well. No, I think this. I want to recognize how complex this discussion is potentially, and maybe just expand a little bit on the process. So the legislation, as Taylor said, allows for all the jurisdictions that enter into an IGA together to be counted as one, because of that 10% limitation on the number of communities that can do this. So there's definitely an advantage in us trying to all get on the same page under the umbrella of an intergovernmental agreement that would require us to move at the same pace and come to agreement on what that target rate is, what the escalator factor is. I did confirm, though, with a deputy at the Department of Labor and Employment that if Boulder County is alone in enacting a wage effective in 2024, and then other jurisdictions subsequently join us and we form an IGA, that would still be considered one governmental entity. I think, ideally we would all do a coordinated stakeholder process with all of our businesses. They're all going to have very similar concerns. When I was involved in the statewide ballot measure in 2016, and there were concerns about cliff effect of people whose wages go up and then they become ineligible for benefits. So that's definitely something to look closely at. I think that it's not going to affect very many people because in the tight labor market, we actually don't have that many people who are earning minimum wage, but that is something we want to be very careful about. And I think the other issue is child care centers that were very concerned in 2016 when we raised the minimum wage statewide that they struggle here with the dilemma of paying their staff more, but then pricing childcare above what people can pay. So that's a very it's a delicate situation. So those are just some things to be thinking about. But because of other limitations in the law, about not being able to raise the wage more than 15% above the state minimum wage, and then a 15% year-over-year increase. It really would be advantageous if we could all come to agreement on a similar approach so that we aren't out of step with one another and create just a more unified employment market here in Boulder County. So I'm going to have to dash out, but I appreciate you making time for this conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Commissioner.
Okay.
We understand you have other responsibilities. So
Thank you.
thank you very much. So that was the staff presentation. If there's any questions on the presentation for the presenters, I'd like to hold the discussion and comments until we get after we have public comment. But Councilor Most.
Yeah, I just had a question about the emancipated minors versus minor wages, like what the rules are around that.
So Taylor, is that something you can answer?
Can you answer that? Because I'm just curious. I happen to have a teen daughter that works, so I'm kind of intimately familiar with that, and I'm just wondering what the rules are for under 18 versus under 18 emancipated minor.
Yeah, so based on the legislation, unemancipated minors would be covered. That's something that's not flexible in anything that was passed. But sorry, I always get this mixed up. Emancipated minors, so people who are younger than 18 and they do not have that status, they would not be covered. It's optional that we could include them in an ordinance, but by default, they are not.
So they're not currently covered by minimum wage rules? I'm confused.
They are covered by minimum wage rules, but anything above the state minimum that we do different than the
okay.
state.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. That clarifies that. Thank you.
Councilor Lay?
Yeah, I probably would have asked this question of Commissioner Levy before she left, but I know she needed to take off. But you laid out, can you put up your timeline again for just a second?
Thanks.
Thanks.
Right there.
Yeah, and as I understood it in the comments, this is a timeline that works toward implementation on January 1st, 2025, is that right?
Correct.
Do you know what the county has given you in the way of rationale for wanting their timeline to run as of the 24th, or the 2024? Do you have a sense of what that is about?
I would be hard pressed to speak to that. Maybe Lauren can.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that they're just seeing, I spoke to some of the numbers about the effects that the gap between the cost of living and wages are having. And, we're hearing, like with the city of Boulder, we have the no eviction without representation, and we have a fund that helps support keeping people in their houses. And we ran out of funds in like the first quarter of this year. So we're just seeing an unprecedented amount of need for financial assistance and things like that across our community. And so the commissioners are, because there's a 15% cap on an annual increase, there's an interest to try and get this ball moving as soon as possible so that we can help get
Matching up.
the need addressed.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Fahey?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a question. I'm not sure which one of you. I think probably councilperson?
We'll let them figure it out.
I'm wondering exactly what cities or towns are involved currently in the IGA? And then is it possible to even expand maybe to Broomfield County?
So there isn't currently an IGA, it's just the working group. And the
Okay.
working group consists of the city of Boulder, Boulder County, Longmont, and Louisville. We do have next week next Tuesday, we will be talking to Lafayette, giving a similar presentation. Originally, Broomfield was part of these conversations, but they were interested in a slower implementation. Now that we might be looking at a 2025 implementation, they might be interested, but we haven't been able to bring them back on board again yet.
And Superior?
We haven't heard much interest from Superior.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to go to public comments, and then we'll come back for more discussion by the city council. So first up, we have Peggy Leach.
Mayor and council, my name is Peggy Leach, and I live at 209 South Lincoln Avenue in Dutch Creek. I've been authorized to speak this evening on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Boulder County. The League is a nonpartisan political organization which encourages informed and active participation in government. So we support efforts to advance a self-sufficiency wage based on our organizational positions and advocacy in the recent past. We believe that alleviating poverty is the shared responsibility of government, employers, individuals, and nonprofit assistance organizations. All sectors should be involved in setting an adequate minimum wage. Research about wage levels should include a focus on people struggling to afford to live here, notably low-income single heads of household, service workers, and people of color who may disproportionately be earning insufficient wages. Any regional minimum wage agreement should take place at a pace that acknowledges the deep needs in our community. Therefore, the League supports the regional stakeholder process that is taking place with the Boulder County Consortium of Cities, and we urge the City of Louisville to continue to participate. And speaking as an individual and a 40-year resident of Louisville, I feel that all parties can work together and find solutions toward sustainable wages for our underpaid workers. I am hopeful that the City of Louisville will soon begin working in earnest with various stakeholders, including workers, labor unions, Chamber of Commerce, businesses, and community groups. I am willing to help in that process if I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Beth Eldridge.
I'm Beth Eldridge. I am one of the unicorn low-income people who has lived in Louisville since 2005. I am a member of ECHO East County Affordable Housing Organization. I'm on the board. I am a disaster case manager and a former elementary school teacher. I have a PhD in educational equity and cultural diversity. And I urge you to please join the Partnership for Boulder County to increase the minimum wage to self-sufficiency standards, reaching, I don't know if this is still the goal, but what I heard was reaching $25 an hour by 2028. Higher compensation empowers workers to support their families, access health care, reinvest in our community, and have better chances in life. It also makes it possible for workers to contribute sustainably in our community. Do you want your local server to have money to fix the holes in the roof of her mobile home? Do you want your 2-year-old's childcare provider to be terrified to go to the doctor, or do you want them to be able to afford medical care? Do you want your grandmother's caretaker to be able to leave their children, not leave their children at home alone, but to be able to get childcare? I have a PhD in education, as I've said, and 6 years of teaching experience. After the Marshall Fire left my home smoke damaged and I needed a less stressful job, I applied to be a paraeducator with Boulder Valley. They would only give me $15 an hour. I had to turn down the job because I could not submit to a vow of poverty for an entire year and the inability to pay my bills. Instead, I ended up getting a job as a disaster case manager. I've heard over 100 stories of Marshall Fire survivors. I've helped clients to get over $120,000 in small unmet needs grants. And Friday will be my last day in this job, partly because of the low wage. In 2016, 71% of Boulder County voters supported raising the minimum wage. As a Unitarian Universalist in the Fellowship of Lafayette, I value the inherent worth and dignity of all people. In Boulder Valley, we need to put our money where our mouths are. More than ever in businesses today, some people earn a lot of money and some people don't. If I had been hired as a teacher, I could have gotten $85,000 to $90,000. I support finding ways to both increase employee compensation to a self-sufficiency wage and also do what we can do to help businesses thrive in Louisville. This is a both-and situation, not an either-or. We have to find ways. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Morgan. You're going to have to help me with the last name. Froome. I was looking for 2 O's for Froome.
I've only ever had one person pronounce it right my whole life. All right. Hello, Council. Thank you so much for listening to this and providing an opportunity for us as the public to speak. And thank you so much to the working group for following this or pursuing this agenda and process. I live at 790 Orchard Drive. My name's Morgan Fromme, and I'm just a humble citizen who has nothing to do with the council behind or the working group behind me, and I find it pretty serendipitous that we all are sort of thinking the same thing. So I wanted to say thank you, Councilmember Most, for providing your support for the Supreme Court decision and the climate action needed specifically. And I wanted to say that I think that raising the minimum wage is probably one of the most important actions that we can take as a community regarding both of those, specifically climate change. Looking around at my fellow generational members and those who are younger than me, I can tell that there is this immense burden of not only what are we facing in the future ahead in terms of our environment, our breathable air, our water, whatever, but the money that we will have to even live a life. So yes, I just wanted to start off and say that I think the minimum wage is one of the most important tasks for us as a society to lift up off the ground. As I'm sure most of you know, it was originally implemented for one household to be able to support one family on one income. And as I was looking to do some research, I was trying to find the data on how much the costs have changed from housing and education compared to wages. And I ended up finding a living wage calculator that was developed in 2023 by some people at MIT in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning. And you're able to plug in any county in any state in the USA, and it'll tell you different wages for the amount of one adult, 2 adults with 1 working, and 2 adults with both working with 0, 1, 2, and 3 children. And I wanted to just point out one number as my time is ending, which was with a family with 2 adults with 1 working, having 0 children, their wages should be at $31.55. And the interesting little data point they had here was the poverty wage, which was where they would note the wage that someone would be earning that would put them in need of government assistance. And when we have a family with 2 adults, 1 working, and 2 children, the poverty wage is currently $13.34, just about 30 cents lower than the current minimum wage. So, yeah, I just wanted to wrap up and say I am coming to you all as a concerned citizen who is not concerned about the equality of everyone, about being able to, own a home at the base of the foothills, a mansion, and without being able to do a minimum wage job, but rather my concern comes from the sustainability of our society. I have massive concern about that. So thank you all so much for pursuing this and for listening.
Thank you. If you could do us a favor and give that website information to the city clerk so she can enter it into the record, and it would be available to the rest, anybody in the public or city council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anybody else in the chambers want to comment on this? Okay, we'll go to Zoom. First up, we have Amy Austin.
Hello, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so hi, I'm Amy Austin, and I live in Louisville in the Enclave, not currently, but will be in a few months. I'm here partially as for myself, my notes just went off of my screen here, but also as a member of Together Colorado, a Boulder Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, and also as a previous speaker of ECHO. And one of the things that we are trying to do at ECHO is to get a more visible presence for these issues in Louisville. So that's something that I'm working on. Without repeating the things that everyone has already said, we definitely are urging the Louisville City Council to become a part of this collaborative effort because I mean, everyone has said why it needs to happen, but I want to also say that it's exciting for these smaller communities to come together to work towards actually getting things done. It is so hard. The higher that we go in our government, the harder it is to make things happen. So it is very exciting to think of these communities coming together for the good of the people around them. Another thing that I wanted to bring up is that one of the things that we feel, especially being a part of the Boulder Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, is that one of the things that we can change here is to become committed to this self-sufficient living wage for all. Is also, this will be reducing the racial and class-based disparities in income and wealth that are really the foundation of a lot of our housing, not only throughout Colorado, but also throughout the United States. So one of the things that as a Unitarian Universalist that we strive for is all kinds of justice, including economic justice, and we are hopeful that this will be a part of it. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Suzanne.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Suzanne Crawford. I'm actually a resident of Broomfield, but I'm the CEO of Sister Carmen Community Center, which is a nonprofit, non-religious family resource center that has been serving Louisville families in need since the 1970s. Sister Carmen Community Center and agencies like ours started out as organizations that provided emergency assistance. However, over the years, things have changed and we are now providing ongoing assistance to fill the gap between low wages that people are paid and the high cost of living. It's absolutely unsustainable. Each month at Sister Carmen, we get 30 to 40% more in rent requests than we can requests for rental assistance than we could possibly fill. We are hearing from our participants that their rents are increasing anywhere between $200 and $800 a month. Food bank assistance this year, or food bank visits this year, are up over 22%. Like I said, it's not sustainable. Nearly 1 in 4 working age households in our community don't make enough to pay for their basic needs. We really all need to work together to change this, and that is why Sister Carmen Community Center supports raising the minimum wage, and we urge the Louisville City Council to keep being involved in the stakeholder process and to work towards a reasonable increase in the minimum wage. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to this.
Thank you. Next up, we have Anna Fernandez. Frank?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Ana Fernandez Frank. I am Public Policy and Community Outreach Coordinator for EFA, Emergency Family Assistance Association in Boulder. And we're here to amplify what Suzanne just shared about the unprecedented level of need that we're seeing in our community. EFA is the Family Resource Center that serves Boulder and the mountain communities. And we are seeing a similar strain in the safety net that we have in Boulder County, that is Sister Carmen, EFA, and our center in the north part of the county. We are seeing double the numbers of families accessing our food bank compared to pre-COVID levels, even higher than at the peak of the pandemic. We are seeing lots of people that didn't need our assistance during the pandemic that now are seeing that they can make ends meet. And this is not just due to inflation. People have also, low-income people have not recovered fully from the effects of the pandemic. And in addition to that, we have seen all the rollbacks of some of the pandemic era supports like rental assistance, increased SNAP benefits are now rolled back to pre-pandemic levels. All these increased evictions that we're seeing, and it's really problematic, and it's putting a strain on our most vulnerable in our community. And so we want to amplify the position of Sister Carmen. We join them in asking that you act with urgency and at the minimum commit to the first step of increasing the minimum wage by 15% by January 1st, 2024. And longer term, we hope that at least we can catch up with Denver, who implemented this in 2020. And it's a very relevant comparison. In Denver, they implemented this even in the middle of the pandemic, and they didn't see any catastrophic effects on businesses or unemployment or anything like that. So I think it's really important to look at Denver as a point of reference because they're our neighbors. And even though just catching up with Denver would be great, but don't forget that Boulder County is 17%. The cost of living in Boulder County is 17% higher than Denver. So our participants, some of which are new to needing assistance, cannot wait a whole other year to receive some relief as we see these supports go away and the strain that the nonprofit sector is seeing. So we hope that you become part of these collaborative efforts in Boulder County and try to achieve an implementation date of January 1st, 2024. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Tracy Berger.
Tracy, you'll have to unmute on your end. There we go.
Oh, sorry. I thought I had. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm Tracy Berger. I live at 2282 Crown Circle, and I'm a mom. I have two little kids who go to daycare here in Louisville, and I just wanted to speak and ask that Louisville continue in this coalition and continue working towards having a higher sustainable living wage in Boulder County. And as part of this coalition, it is so expensive to live here. I see friends getting priced out of the neighborhood and having to move farther away. It harms our community. It harms the village that we raise our children in. I think we need to be really cognizant of the fact that people work in Louisville for the minimum wage, and people who work in our community should be able to live in our community. And right now those don't align. And I just wanted to speak real quickly and encourage everybody to stay in this coalition and keep fighting for a living wage in Boulder County.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to council comments and questions. And I think Councilor Most, you had your hand up earlier, and so.
I just want to thank everybody for speaking. on this issue. I think it's a really, really important issue. I have, like I said, because I have a daughter that's a teenager, she's under 18, working in the community, I have some idea of what's going on with minimum wage jobs and people getting jobs. And one of the things that I've found that's interesting is that in Louisville, we certainly do have, particularly like supermarkets, fast food restaurants, there are a number of businesses in this community that are paying $17+ right now. We also have businesses that don't. We have small businesses that feel more pressure in terms of minimum wage. And so one of the things that's really important to me is that we do support participating in this consortium and really thinking about living wages and what it means for someone to afford to live here. And I think that's also connected to the affordable housing analysis we're doing, because those two things go hand in hand. And I think that we have a responsibility to make sure that our community is an open place and a welcoming place for people at different income levels. And so I know, I serve on the Economic Vitality Committee. I know there are small businesses that tend to feel really pressured when we start talking about this issue. So as a community, as a council, in terms of policies we set, as a city, I think we need to figure out how to make that work in our town, whatever that means, right? And if that requires some kind of policy setting, intervention, support from the city, then I think that has to be on the table, because we really want people to be able to live here and as someone who has struggled financially at times and a single mom, I understand that. My affordable housing is my mortgage that I luckily refinanced at 2.75%. I couldn't afford my house otherwise. I couldn't be living here. And so it's like I get it on a visceral level. And I also understand that, we have people that are trying to run successful businesses in this town. So I think we're going to have, as a community, to have some significantly difficult discussions and talk about how we make those things work together. So I really appreciate all the information we got, all the stories, and the real world consequences of what's happening economically right now in our community in Boulder County. So I really want to thank everyone for sharing that.
Thank you. Next up is Councilor Dickinson, who actually is our member on the consortium of cities that we've been participating in these discussions. Councilor Dickinson.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is, obviously a huge discussion, a big issue, and in a lot of ways we're, a small city in that conversation. But I think as far as the conversation tonight, what's really important to me is that we are trying to remain a member of this larger community, right? That if Louisville is attempting to do our own thing just in our borders, that won't have the desired effect that we want it to have, and it will have a larger negative effect on our business owners than if the region does it, right? So what we're hoping for is, the state acting or the country acting, federally, to say, okay, well, this is the new bottom. This is the new bottom. This is the new bottom. And it'd be great if the state would do that, and where it's lagging. And part of that, right, is we all understand national politics are a lot harder to get things moving. But I am certainly in support of us maintaining this relationship and trying to get a larger group of municipalities than our own to walk together through this and to make these changes at the same time, so there's not a competitive disadvantage from neighborhood to neighborhood, business to business. So I think that's a big part of it. And then, it's such a frustrating conversation, right? Because when we talk about raising the minimum wage from like 13 to 15, you're not solving anything. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it doesn't solve the housing crisis. It doesn't solve the fact that you can work all day long and you only make enough money to pay the childcare that allows you to work. And so what's the point, right? You might as well stay at home, but then you make no money. So how do you feed your kid? It's just these kind of choices don't make sense. And of course, well, go get a higher paying job or, work two jobs, right? Or these solutions or get multiple roommates or, you got to figure this stuff out. So I don't think that I don't think that a $15 an hour minimum wage is going to solve anything. I also think that we need to be moving in that direction, and as a region, and we need to be getting Superior on board and Lafayette on board and Broomfield and Longmont, and we need to be all working together in this direction. So, I mean, I feel like the question tonight is not, should we raise our minimum wage? The question tonight is not, will this solve everything? The question is, should we continue to work with the consortium and continue to work with this working group? And I would say absolutely, and I hope we can grow it and expand it, and I'm happy to be a part of that effort and speak to our colleagues in Superior and Lafayette especially. But we need to do this together. That's the big thing for me, is that we need to do this together, and we need to do it as quickly as possible. And it needs to be, we need to keep in mind that it is only one tool in our toolkit to kind of fight the bigger issues of our time right now. So I appreciate Maxine's comments, and I appreciate all the presentation and the residents' comments. I think there's a lot of alignment. And as a small business owner myself, I pay salaries, I pay hourly rates, I monitor this stuff. I have the posters up on my wall. I'm tracking it, and what I can tell you is that even though none of my employees make minimum wage, when the minimum wage increases, I have to increase the wages of my lowest earning employees, because I don't want them to make minimum wage, right? So just keep in mind, raising the minimum wage does affect our small businesses, even the ones that don't pay minimum wage, because gosh, well, how am I going to get an employee if I'm paying minimum wage? I got to pay more than that. So it lifts everybody, which I think is positive. But when you're thinking about our businesses and the impact it has on them, it impacts businesses you may not think it impacts, because a rising tide lifts all ships in a good way and bad way for their bottom line. But I'll end there. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Fahey.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I will agree with everything that's been said by Councilmember Most and Councilmember Dickinson. I think that this is something that we do need to continue being a part of, could contribute to. I would love to see it expand and include Superior, Lafayette, Broomfield County, perhaps. That would be, it would just say so much to the public. One thing I do kind of worry about is the backlash from the business owners, particularly the small business owners. So if we could do some kind of outreach to them, make sure that in the community discussions that there's a large effort to get their input and what could make this easier for them in some way. I'm not sure how that could happen, but I am in favor of going forward with this in some way and staying with the consortium, increasing the consortium and what they can accomplish.
Thank you. Councilor Hefner.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thanks to all the public commenters. I really appreciated hearing what everyone had to share, as well as the other folks who joined us tonight from the consortium. I very much agree that it's important that Louisville continue to participate in the broader effort with our neighboring governments toward the goals of cooperation and trying to find common ground and common goals. My hope would be that if this effort breeds success, we could expand it into other areas like affordable housing, which in my view has as much, if not more, of an impact on overall sort of well-being in this area. My interest in particular in seeing what comes out of the consortium is on the economic studies. I think it's important that we try and take an honest view of this and recognize that, like all policy, there are probably costs and benefits, and trying to think hard about what the costs and benefits are. I think many, probably not all, but many economists would probably agree that raising the minimum wage will raise the earnings of many low-wage workers, but will likely cause other low-wage workers to become unemployed. And trying to assess that in an honest way and figuring out if the policy that the consortium sort of is crafting is going to have a big enough net positive impact to be worthwhile. That's the analysis that I'd really like to see. I also think it's important that we involve the Chamber of Commerce and the business community, and especially the small business community, from day one. I've certainly heard that it's very difficult right now for small businesses to hire and retain employees, and they're facing the same upward cost pressures across the board that the rest of us are. Rents, materials, labor. It's difficult out there for everyone. And I would hate to be sending the message to our small businesses that we don't care whether they're here or not, because I don't think that's true. The other group that I think really ought to be included in the outreach is the nonprofit community, who even more so than small businesses face really difficult cost pressures, and hiring at the margin one employee versus no employees for many nonprofits is a huge decision. And so just thinking that through and making sure we understand the impacts of what's obviously a very well-intentioned and in my view, correctly intentioned action is critical.
Thank you. Councilor Hamilton, and then Councilor Lay.
Thank you. Very nicely said, Councilor Hefner. A lot of your comments touched on what I was hoping to speak to this evening. I do agree there's a sense of urgency here, but I want to make sure it doesn't come at the expense of our due diligence, which much of that was highlighted in the comments just before me. I would be interested in seeing more data specific to Louisville and what our economy and job market looks like here in order to help us in this decision-making process. That'll really also, I think, help us formulate these conversations with certain groups that have been proposed tonight and help us better understand where they're at. But overall, for me, there's no question that I support continuing working with this group on this effort.
Thank you. Councilor Lay.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for everybody who's both provided analysis and made the points that you have and have spoken to this, because there's obviously concern in the community, and I know. Not to say anything less of anybody else, but when Effa and Sister Carmen talk about this stuff, I know that they deal with it on an absolutely minute-by-minute basis. So because they cover the whole county, I'm similarly in favor of the effort to keep connected with the consortium. We've done this for years. I was the council liaison of the consortium for quite a number of years. And the things that we did on affordable housing, I think, are bearing fruit now. And they have been certainly talking points for me as I talk to other people about shared sacrifice and shared contribution. So hopefully, and I would also, I think Council Member Hefner said it well in terms of some of the concerns that are out there, as did the Mayor Pro Tem. There's ultimately some of this is going to fall on the consumers too, right? Because most of these charges will be passed on to them. That's not a bad thing, and that may not be a terribly difficult thing in a community like ours, but I think keeping in mind all of the various stakeholders would be good. I think one thing, just to push the point around looking at data in Louisville, I'd also be concerned a little bit about not including or to the extent that we don't include neighboring communities in this because they don't want to participate, I think that actually may affect us more than it may certain other communities. For example, if Broomfield isn't involved, that may pose significant questions to local businesses in Louisville more so than maybe in Boulder. So I would, part of the answer to that, I think, is to work really hard and to continue to work really hard on working with neighboring communities. And not just Broomfield and Superior, but potentially Erie, Westminster as well. So anyway, I'm for continuing to work with this group.
Thank you. So one of the problems with being mayor is you go last, and all the good thoughts are already said. So, I want to thank my fellow counselors that there's not a lot I have to add. I think that, Taylor, Lauren, thank you for being here. And thank you for Commissioner Levy being here as well. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your roadshow. I think what you've heard from my, my cohorts here is we would like your roadshow to also go to neighboring communities of Louisville. I think a regional adoption is the only way to go. And, I think that, Taylor, you put up that timeline. That to me suggests a reasonable timeline is 2025, because I think it's really important for us as a city to really understand what's going on with businesses and nonprofits, and I think everybody has said that. We should do this, absolutely we should do this, but we should do it the right way. And, I think that all the constituents of the city of Louisville need to be part of that, and we need to move ahead in a very positive way. It's interesting me looking at the target that was in the slide, and then the next bullet talks about alignment with living wage, and what's the right number? We're always sort of challenged by that, but I like having data that we can use to target, as opposed to coming up with a target. So for example, if the living wage is $17.42, it seems to me that's the target we should be looking at, and that should be reviewed on an annual basis. Something you're really using data as opposed to just picking a number. To me, it's really important that we have this alignment with our neighbors. I can't imagine doing something without Superior, Lafayette, and Broomfield at least conceptually being on board. Because I think when we go through a process, whether we do through economic vitality or however we do that with the business community, is understanding what the gotchas are, what the danger is of losing businesses. So I think that's really important. I really like the whole discussion of policy discussion. And for me, it's really coming up with something that we can create a policy that can actually have sort of a living aspect to it. So it's not like every year we have to get together and say, okay, let's do this target calculation, but it's something like living wage that does make sense. But I want to thank all of my colleagues for their comments. I want to thank you for your time. I think that Louisville, Councilor Lay was part of the consortium cities. Now we have Councilor Dickinson, and we very much support that. Whether it's DEI or this issue or other things, we as a city very much support those things. Did I wrap that up to everyone's satisfaction? All right. All right. Well, I think that's it. So thank you very much. We appreciate you being here, and we look forward to you coming back for another roadshow, and we have more to talk about. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is ordinance number 1854, series 2023, an ordinance for extending the city's 3/8 of 1%, 0.375% sales tax for parks and open space purposes for an additional 10-year period, imposing an additional 1/8 of 1%, 0.125% sales tax for open space purposes as provided herein, and providing for the submission of a ballot question to the vote of the registered electors at the regular election to be held on November 7th, 2023. And this is the first reading, and the purpose of the first reading is just to set the public hearing, which will be July the 25th. So anybody who would like to comment, you have another 2 weeks to comment to council, and we will have certainly public comments then. We got public comments, we got comments from the task force, and I would ask that the city manager take a look at those. I think there's some of those provided some excellent clarification and maybe some rewording. In particular, we had the word improve, and there was some better words about restoration and things like that. So I think we should take those to heart, and that would be really good if we come back on the 25th to a revised version. Sound good? Do we have a motion to approve this?
So moved.
I heard a first and a second there. Do I need a roll call on this? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. City Attorney, you have 3 minutes for your report.
I will cede my 3 minutes back to the city council. I have no report.
Thank you very much. Okay, so next, the City Council comments, committee reports, and identification of future agenda items. Seeing none, we're adjourned.